Good afternoon, Mark Sott with HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion for Tuesday, September 20th, 2016. Here is the track map for Tropical Storm Karl, and you can see that the center is forecast to turn northwest and eventually north and northeast, far enough away from Bermuda to perhaps keep hurricane conditions away. If this does in fact become a hurricane, it's still struggling quite a bit. If we look at the satellite animation, the visible satellite shot, still pretty disheveled looking out here, upper level low to its west. Still has vertical wind shear coming across from the south. And it's interesting, the National Hurricane Center, some of the forecasters were tweeting today that the shear forecasts for this have been awful. That the global models were suggesting much lower shear than we're seeing. So it's been struggling to say the least. By the way, this is still the leftover circulation and vorticity center of Julia, still hanging around. My office is right here in southeast North Carolina, and it's a cloudy, gray, kind of dreary day here, mild outside, rain showers around, but this just needs to go away. Enough is enough. And then over here is our new tropical storm, Lisa, and this will stay out in the open Atlantic. Not enough of a strong ridge over the Atlantic right now to drive these systems west. So instead, this will turn out. This will eventually turn up and out near Bermuda, as I alluded to earlier. How close it comes remains to be seen. We'll take a look at that in more detail in just a moment. First of all, there's the vorticity maximum, or maxima, whichever, right? Of Julia. What's left over of it looks like a sort of a teardrop or whatever. It's getting elongated and finally going to be stretched out and just eventually dissipate. But until it does, still some rather unpleasant conditions overall. It's not good beach weather, put it that way. And then we have Karl out here with this interesting little appendage out ahead of it. And so this is competing energy. Basically, you look at Tropical Storm Pain over here in the Pacific. As I talked about yesterday, this is what a well-developed cyclone looks like. This is not, and this is getting there. At least it has sort of an S shape, trying to consolidate its energy. But, it's just been the story of the Atlantic this year. These systems have looked kind of odd in their vorticity signatures, and it's not until late in the game that they start to develop. But I think with Karl, it will eventually get its act together and probably become a hurricane. This is the different track models from the 12Z guidance this morning. And again, the main point is the recurvature of the system out of the tropics up here into the North Atlantic. And it'll be a question of how close this comes to Bermuda. And I'm concerned because most of the guidance here does indicate fairly robust strengthening around the time that it would be in the vicinity of Bermuda, anywhere from 84 to 96 hours or so. And you have a range from a Category 3, possibly, and many of them here in the Cat 1 or 2. And, that's, nobody wants that, especially in Bermuda. That's a great area. I've been there twice, once for a hurricane and once for some follow-up work. And, man, that's a lovely, lovely place, and they could do without any tropical mischief. And if it's strengthening as it goes by, and that's what this guidance here is indicating, an upward trend, then that can be problematic. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on just how close to Bermuda this tracks. That being said, I want to show you the GFS run from this morning. I'm at 48 hours out, by the way. So this is the 48-hour time frame, and this is valid on Thursday morning, this coming Thursday morning, at 8 o'clock, 12 UTC. It will be 8 o'clock Eastern time, all right? And there is our system at the 850 millibar level. Still doesn't look very well organized, but that's not the main concern right now. There's Bermuda, small geographic area and a large ocean. Hard to hit it, but it has been done. And believe me, over history, Bermuda has definitely had its share. So let's go through the frames here, and you'll see how close this comes. We move through Thursday afternoon into Friday morning, and you notice a couple of things, that the storm gets a little bit more focused and round in its vorticity signature in the model field. Again, there's Bermuda right there. Keep your eye on that. Again, going through the frames here, we are now Friday morning in the early hours, and it starts to approach Bermuda coming in from the south-southwest. Starting to strengthen, it looks like, in the model field. Here we are on late Friday night, very early Saturday morning. There's Bermuda right there, and this would be the center position of the system more than likely if it's lined up from 5,000 feet down to the ocean's surface, which it should be. I don't see any strong wind shear coming through. It's not like there's this huge trough coming in with strong southerly flow ahead of it. But nevertheless, there's Bermuda right there. And so this is approaching, fairly close. If we move through the frames here, it gets even stronger. You can see that in the vorticity signature. And at its closest point right here, this would be in the early morning hours on Saturday, probably just after sunup. There's Bermuda. And so the distance between the center and the island of Bermuda is probably 30 miles or so, 45 at the most. And so that's, concerning for sure. I would be more concerned if this was coming up and passing, let's see if I can draw it better, this way to the north of Bermuda, putting Bermuda in that right front quadrant over here. As it stands, it would be on the northwest quadrant if we divide it up like that. And so it's not quite as nasty. Usually, it's a good rule of thumb that the right front quadrant of a hurricane relative to its forward motion is usually the fiercest side, but that's not always the case. And then it goes on past throughout the day Saturday, just kind of grazing Bermuda. So we'll watch this very closely. I'll update this again tomorrow, and we'll keep an eye on that X there, sort of representing the center and of vorticity, and we'll see if it does in fact come closer or if it gets a little farther away. All right, I want to point out a couple of other things as we move through time. A couple of interesting things we're going to watch. By the way, this is Lisa. Again, no worries, this will turn out to sea. But I want to draw your attention to sort of this feature right over here, over Africa, passing out of Nigeria into Ghana, just north of the Gulf of Guinea down here. I can scroll the map down a little bit. No, I can't. Tropical wave, energy in the atmosphere here, an easterly wave at a fairly low latitude. And you can see it on the vorticity signature. Not much to it right now. It's not very strong, but it is there. And it's moving generally westward at a fairly low latitude here. And it's interesting because the models are starting to pick up on this. Now, believe it or not, you know what these 99L and 93L, you've heard all about those. Well, there's actually something that happens before those, and they're called pouches. I'm not making this up. It's sort of a, see right there, an area of energy. They call them a pouch, a pouch of energy. I don't know who comes up with this. It's not me. And they have an L here for Atlantic, and they get numbered throughout the season. And this one just happens to be pouch number 39L. And it gets tracked from different agencies. I don't, let's see who this one's from, if I can find it at the bottom. No, it doesn't say. But these are tracked, as sort of areas to watch. And some of them develop, obviously, and some of them don't. And so this is the sort of the forecast based on the GFS recently. And, it's interesting because this is the west coast of Africa here. This is where it is now. And you have these different parameters that they look at for favorability, etc. And pretty much everything suggests that this will try to develop very slowly as it moves across the Atlantic in the MDR, the main development region. So what I've done, I'm going to take you out to 144 hours, and I realize that's fairly far out in time, but there it is right there in the deep part of the tropics. There's the west coast of Africa, and here's our friends over here in the southern Windward Islands, all right, and the eastern Caribbean. This is what it looks like at day 7. It starts to develop at a low latitude coming in towards Trinidad and Tobago here. It's that time of year where, as I alluded to, these tropical waves are going to stop coming off up here and getting yanked out and beaten to death by these hostile conditions. Instead, the seasonal shift south of the intertropical convergence zone and these tropical waves will mean the second part of the peak of the season comes into play. Right? I mean, I talked about it yesterday, and here it is starting to come to fruition. Another area of energy coming off behind this one. So we're going to have to watch this very closely right here, because the models are generally picking up on this. This is from Levi Cowan's site, tropicaltidbits.com. A nice map showing the ensemble member pressure centers, the GFS mean ensemble, so all the runs of the GFS, and you see this clustering. Let me outline it in red right here, and all these different ensemble members in here indicating the possibility of development, and the different areas showing low pressure. Don't pay attention to that so much as the density in here. You don't have just a random one, here and there, whatever. You see this coloration, it's a pretty good example of the amount of ensemble members showing development coming out of the MDR, the deep tropics here, and possibly impacting the Eastern Caribbean. So we're going to have to watch that very closely. We have Karl to keep track of. In the Eastern Pacific, there's Tropical Storm Pain, but that's weakening quickly, bringing some moisture to the southwest, but I don't see a big flood threat out of that. Maybe some beneficial rains, but the big stories will undoubtedly be Karl and how close that gets to Bermuda. Hopefully it'll generate some waves for the East Coast, and the surfing community can enjoy that. And then we're going to be watching the deep tropics as we get into next week especially. So interesting times ahead for sure. All right, that's it for me for today. Have a great rest of your Tuesday afternoon. Again, I'm Mark Sutta for HurricaneTrack.com. As always, thanks very much for your time and attention. I'll talk with you again tomorrow.